Good evening and welcome to UK Crime Book Club. I'm just about to go live, so I'm just hoping that it's okay.
My notifications aren't appearing, are they? By the
way. No, yeah. I'm just waiting for the video to connect live. Everybody, thank you for joining us. And tonight I'm delighted to be joined by Alex Chaudhuri, known as AA Chaudhuri. And we're going to be talking about Alex's fantastic book this evening, which came out last week, called Under Her Roof.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alex, for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself for people who don't know you, or and the book as well?
Yes, I write as A. Chaudhuri. I've had 6 books published. The first 2 were sort of legal thrillers, part of my Crane and Carver legal thriller series. But my last 4 books, including Under Her Roof, have all been psychological thrillers with Hero Books. So I've written She's Mine was my first, then The Loyal Friend, then The Final Party, which came out last year, and now my most recent book, Under Her Roof. So I tend to write quite dark, twisty thrillers. And Under Her Roof, basically it tells the story of a struggling author, Sebastian, who rents a room in the sort of sprawling palatial Hampstead mansion of this somewhat mysterious widow, Adriana. And the rent is ridiculously cheap. He thinks Hampstead will inspire him to write, but he's also there to pursue this other agenda that he's not told anyone about. And despite his misgivings, which centre around her somewhat strange house rules, and the fact that the last lodger died in tragic circumstances, he takes the room. It just seems like she wants company. But things soon take an ominous turn when he realises that they are both being watched. And he doesn't know what this watcher person wants, but he starts to think it may be related to Adriana's past, because she's very reticent to talk about her past, but it's clear something bad happened, and that might explain why she keeps the house like a fortress as well. So that's the general premise. And there's lots of twists and turns.
I read it with my squad pod friends, who I know you did a chat with as well, which I haven't watched yet because I just want to ask the same questions as they did, and I said so I'm going to watch it afterwards. But we all absolutely loved it, and you said about The Final Party. I read that one last year, and I absolutely loved that as well. So I was really excited to read this book. It's one of those books that we are going to have to skirt around quite a lot of issues because it would give massive spoilers. So we're going to go. So people who've read it will know where we're going with it. So we're going to sort of talk about more general things so that we don't give away spoilers. But all I can say is there are some cracking twists in this book.
Thank you.
Absolutely gripping. So let's talk about the characters first. So we said about Seb. So I was like, when he sort of, because really from the outset that you sort of think, don't you? Well, I felt as the reader, I thought, something's not right here. And he sort of knows it as well, doesn't he? But he still goes with it because of what's happened to him in the past. He wants to keep his life sort of secret as well.
Yeah, exactly. And he's come to that area also to feel inspired. And he's been staying with his friend Jasper, obviously, in rubbishy sort of student type digs. So he wants to sort of he feels like he's overstayed his welcome there, and then this place comes up, and it is sort of too good to be true, and he can't really resist it. It's so spacious. He thinks it's going to give him room to write. It's so light. It's called Serenity House. He thinks that's a good omen as well. But yeah, of course, when Adriana's agent shows him around and sort of mentions the fact that the last lodger, fell off the roof after a Christmas party, he does start to have his doubts and concerns. And then he meets Adriana, and he hears about that from her, and the fact that she won't let him speak to the neighbour next door. It all seems a bit but he just can't resist. It's just too amazing a house to turn down. And he also feels his connection with her, I think, because they're both, you know, they're both only children. He finds solace in his writing, you know, even though he's a lot more together than Adriana, he has suffered grief and loss in the past, like she has, and they both find solace in their artistic pursuits, her in her art, him in his writing. And I think that's why he feels this pull towards her, besides the kind of, you know, physical chemistry they feel. He feels this artistic connection as well.
Yeah, because she, you know, she is very, she's timid, isn't she? She's had, you know, she lost her husband. She's, you know, obviously still devastated for that. Then she's had this lodger, and he's also sort of had quite a, you know, he had a tragic death, which she's not sort of completely convinced of what they were told. Well, there's sort of, there's question marks, isn't there, around what actually happened to him. And she confides quite quickly in Seb, doesn't she? Although she's quite a private person, I think she thinks quite from the outset that she can trust Seb.
He's very different to the previous
and then there's that
he's quite quiet and he's easy to talk to, and he knows, she knows that he's lost his mother recently, and you know, she senses that fragility in him, and I think she feels for him. She feels empathy for him. You know, obviously she lost her parents in tragic circumstances as well, so there's that kind of, you know, empathy, mutual empathy that they have.
Yeah. How did they both come about? How did the idea of the book, did that sort of come along with the characters,
the whole
or did
sort
the
of
characters come
later type idea? Yeah. So, you know,
yeah.
in all my I think any psychological thriller writer will always try and take quite an ordinary, everyday sort of setup. You know, that's what the psychological thriller is all about, is taking very ordinary people in ordinary situations that we can all relate to. And that's why I think they're so compelling, because we can see ourselves in that position. You know, I've done friendship before, I've done the gym, I've done motherhood, definitely. And I thought, well, why not do landlord and tenant? Because most of us will have been, I mean, I've certainly been a tenant a few times. Some of us, not me, but some of us will have been landlords. And so I thought that would be something very relatable. But I also thought it has the potential to take a particularly dark route, because invariably you're a stranger to the other person. So, you know, you don't normally know your landlord personally, or vice versa. So that has the potential to bring in all these sort of secrets that they have from each other into that scenario. So I thought that would ramp up sort of tension. And then I wanted to marry it with this idea of being stalked, which I think is quite a topical issue at the moment. You've got programs like Baby Reindeer and things like that. You know, our lives are on show. We're on social media now. You know, we put our lives on show all the time. You know, we don't know who might be watching us. So it's the idea of Big Brother watching.
No, absolutely.
I just thought it would be really interesting to marry that within the landlord and tenant setup. But also, you know, have it somewhere beautiful like Hampstead, where one should feel really safe and secure. You know, they're in this massive £1 million house where they should be really secure, and they feel anything but. And you've got that sort of dramatic irony that I wanted to get across. A bit like The Final Party last year. You know, it's setting something very dark in something very idyllic, just to get that dramatic effect.
Yeah. Because I think we'll come back to the house, because I think it is an important part of the book as well, isn't it? But we'll come back to that sort of later. But without giving too much away, I also was really interested in the sort of flawed characters of people in the book, I'll say. And I know that you have had those previously. Are they fun to write? Do you enjoy having that?
Very fun to write. I mean, sometimes the issues that related to those flawed characters are difficult ones.
Yes.
But they can be quite heartbreaking ones, but they are interesting, and it makes, I think, a flawed character is absolutely essential in the psychological thriller, because it's all about ramping up that intrigue, that suspicion, that sense of dread. You don't want them to be peachy perfect. You want them to be, you want them to have something wrong with them, because you don't know if you can trust them. And of course, in a psychological thriller, the story is being told through the characters predominantly. So you don't, you want to be constantly questioning, can I believe this person because, they drink too much, or they've got this affliction, or they've got this terrible secret. And I think that makes them more interesting. And I think it really enriches the plot, because you want your readers to be invested in the characters, even if they don't particularly like them. You want to be able to understand them and understand what's made them the people they are today. Often it would be something that happens in your childhood that will impact on the type of person you are as an adult. And I think that can create empathy in the reader, and then the reader's more invested in the story. So I think character, that's the one thing I really work on in my books, is the characterization. I'm not a huge plotter, but I do really do quite detailed character profiles, just so we can really understand them as people.
Yeah. We've got some people watching, and I've got so Leslie and Sarah. So Sarah says yes, she agrees. It's a very dark and twisty book. And Leslie says she likes dark and twisty, so that's good.
That's the winner. Thank you, Leslie.
And Sarah says she had the wrong. She's completely had the wrong person, Sarah said. So
my job.
I think as we said at the beginning, there's so many things we can't talk about, but actually, it's a real wower, this one, with because I think in the final party you had characters who are quite unlikable, and it's very different, this one, isn't it? Where, because you had different people, and there was the secret, and some of them, actually quite a lot of them, weren't very likable, but this was different.
Probably my other books as well. I really feel this is a departure for me. I think these characters are more empathetic, definitely. I don't. Neither of them have got nasty traits to them. Sort of. Well, they're both. They've both. And Seb especially. He really wants to get to the truth. He wants. He cares for Adriana. He could have just left, but he didn't, because he wants to try and protect her. So I think they are. Yeah. My other characters have got quite vicious sides to them, some of them, but I think these characters are softer, and it was slightly different for me in the sense that it's predominantly told just through the two of their voices, whereas I've had quite a few characters in She's Mine had nine characters, so it's very different in that sense.
Do you think with having a smaller cast, if you want to call it, or collection of characters, that you get that ability to be able to delve into them even more?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've got more pages on them, haven't you? So you can just devote more time to their innermost thoughts and their backgrounds. And if you're constantly switching between characters, it's not so easy. It's not so easy to do that. And also you're learning about the character through the other character's eyes. So obviously Adriana's observing Seb, and Seb's observing Adriana. So you're building up the character in that sense too, not just through their innermost thoughts. But I enjoyed it very much, doing something different.
Yeah, and I think it must be, because actually it must be fun to write not nice characters, but it also must be nice to write characters that are generally good people.
Yeah.
But still have that psychological twist, which this does. This is not a fairy story by any stretch of the imagination.
Sure.
Just what sort of so the book, although we can't say very much about it, you obviously carried out research to write about the book. Can you sort of tell us a bit of how you came to for the people who've read it or know what I'm talking about, how you came to that part of to come across the research for this, or how you basically carried it out generally without giving any spoilers?
Well, it's sort of tied up with the whole watcher type thing, the whole stalker type scenario. But I do a lot of research on the internet into various issues and what would make an interesting oh god, it's really hard to describe this one.
Yeah, I know.
I went on a lot of forums and things like that,
Yeah,
and yeah, just basically loads of research on the internet for that particular one. But I had to do other research.
yeah.
I'm sorry I can't go into detail on that. But,
No, it's fine because actually, Sarah's just asked, "What would your internet history say
no,
about you?" So,
my internet history generally and all of my books is pretty scary. I'm hoping that Big Brother does know I'm an author and not a psycho. Yeah, so I did research into quite a lot of forensics research as well. There's one particular scene where I had to get the forensic bit really spot on. It's quite far into the book. I'll tell you after if you're not quite sure which bit it is, but
yeah,
it relates to the house anyway. So I had to get the help of the lovely Graham Bartlett to advise me on that, and we had a forensic expert as well that came in on that as well, because you write the book and it's a really good book, and then you send it to your editor, and they're like, what about that? The sort of the practicality of something. How would that actually work? And you're like, oh no. And this particular bit was like, I have to solve this because readers are clever, and they're going to be like, well, wouldn't this be the case? And so Graham was amazing and advised me in that, and that really came off well. And I did research into high-tech security systems, different types of alarm systems, key locks, double locks, what would be really secure. I lived in northwest London for about 13 years, so I know the area pretty well, but obviously I hadn't been back in a while, so I had to make sure my understanding of Hampstead was up to date, and I wanted to make sure that the house was on a road right across from the Heath, so I looked up the streets on Street Map and all that kind of thing. What else did I do? Yeah, those were the main sort of location research, that type of thing. But yeah, obviously there's the key bit of research that I can't go into.
There is. Yeah. Are you quite strict with your research, or are you go down a rabbit hole, disappear for a week sort of person?
Vicky did actually ask me that as well.
Actually,
yeah, no, I'm quite. I mean, I do. Yeah, I do. Sometimes I just print up pages and pages of things, and I think, why did I do that? Because it's quite interesting. And having been a history student, I'm quite and a lawyer. Like, I had to do a lot of research in both those things. So I do quite like research. It's quite interesting. But no, I have to stop myself at some point. Otherwise, I won't be writing the book.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you've got to get it right, definitely, for something like this.
Yeah.
You've got to actually do your homework. Otherwise, it won't come off authentically.
Well, no, it's really important when you're sort of, dealing with complicated matters. I think we can say that you do get it right. Yeah. What challenges did writing this book sort of give you? Is there anything that was very different because it was a different sort of, did you find it harder in any way? Was there any bits that you sort of found difficult to complete?
Not really, if I'm being honest.
Well,
I mean, I suppose, it was, I had to really, switching between the two characters was a departure for me. But I also had the flashbacks as well to Adriana's past. So, that was that sort of, it was fleshed out the story as well. So that was quite, it meant I wasn't always in the voices of Seb and Adriana. I had that backstory as well. And I always try to include backstory. All my books so far have had, flashback scenes, because I think they're very important to understand what's happening in the real time as well, to kind of understand why a person is the way they are in the present time.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy a flashback scene, I have to say. And rather than the characters recanting it in their mind, I think flashback scenes are very, very effective because you're there in the moment with the character. You've gone back in time with the character to that moment, so you're still feeling it with them rather than being told by the character in the present. So I do enjoy a good flashback.
Yeah, I think it does help, doesn't it, to help you understand the character more, because on paper they can, in the present they can, appear awful or whatever reason, but actually when you sort of read their backstory or whatever, find out what actually happened to them 10, 20, whatever years ago, you sort of, you have more empathy
Yeah,
with them, don't you, as a reader,
exactly.
or you understand why they are the way they are.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Because I think, all of us are affected by our upbringings, childhoods. So I think, it has a profound impact on the way we are. So it's important to bring that in, I think, to flesh them out.
Yeah, yeah. It must be interesting to write, like starting, like, although you've written, lots of books before and you've had a way, but it must be quite nice and fresh to be able to sort of take it in a different direction. Was that did you find that something that you really sort of relished in this, and do you think you'll carry on that way, or do you think you'll sort of, go between the two?
I think I'll go between the two. I mean, the next book, again, you might want to ask me about that a bit later, but
I will.
I've done something quite different again, because I quite like sort of mixing it up.
Yeah.
I think it's quite nice for the reader to think, oh, she's not doing the same thing again. It's quite good to just do different things every time and try and mix it up just to make it more interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I think as a reader, I like to be. I mean, I think I think there's probably cases for both of it. Some people really like their authors to write their books the same, so they pick it up.
You know what they're
You call
getting.
it.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, you pick it up. You know what you're going to get, and no surprises. Whereas I like to be surprised when
yeah.
I'm reading. So, and I
I think,
don't want to read a book again
I
with
think
different
that
people.
this book is slightly more sort of not literary, but it's a bit more, maybe a bit more finesse to my previous books, in the sense that, because of the whole setup and it's, yeah, I think because the other books, there's quite bitchy elements as well to it, isn't there? Whereas you don't get that in this book at all. It's a bit more, heartfelt,
It's
I think.
Yeah, a bit more sensitive, isn't it? I
Yeah,
think as I said, the book has there is some shocks in it, I'll say.
yeah,
And I was but it's also a massive spoiler, so I can't talk about
yeah.
what those massive shocks are. But how difficult was it to write so that the reader, because there's always that thing, isn't there, about the reader having the chance to solve it,
Yeah.
but also as a writer to be able to not give that away. And was that difficult? Was that when because you write quite quickly, don't you? I remember
Yeah,
from before
yeah.
was that, did that sort of come quite naturally, or did it come in the editing process?
No, with this one, I definitely went back over. In fact, I worked quite differently with this one. I sort of edited as I went along. Normally,
Yeah.
I sort of bash it out and then I go over. But because some things changed as I wrote, I had to go back and just make sure it wasn't too much of a clue, and it was, if I could hide it a bit better, and but also gives little hints as well. So this one was much more complex in that sense, I think. So
Yeah.
a lot of editing as I went on with this one, just particularly with the beginning bit, just to sort of nail that, get that, right, and just make sure.
Complex, that's a really good way, isn't it? The word, I think
Yeah,
complex is a really good way of describing it.
yeah, and even the ending, although that whole shock didn't change, it wasn't completely how I envisaged it would end. That changed as well as I went on. I was sort of chopping and changing between two things. So, but I always write like that. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not a plotter at all.
No, I
People are
remember you
quite
saying that
surprised because my
before.
books are quite complex, and they think surely she must have all these sort of spider diagrams. But I'm not. I'm not like that at all. I have beginning, middle, and end. I know roughly what the big twist is, and then I'll start and I get my characters right, and then I'll just start writing and see where it takes me. It's quite dangerous, but it's also quite exciting, because when you think up that new twist or that red herring, it's a great moment when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that fills me with horror, because I'm a real planner for everything. So
well, everyone's different, you know. It's just
exactly, and there's so many people that are, you know, who write, you know, like you do, and there's so many people who like literally plot to the, you know,
yeah.
to the
My good friend Jacqueline Sutherland, who I've done library talks with, she's, you know, when we go and speak to libraries, she's an absolutely meticulous plotter. My books are brilliant, whereas I'm the opposite, and it's quite fun to sort of talk about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Even though we write the same genre, yeah, everyone's brains.
It is, yeah, it is interesting, and I think I find it fascinating that, you know, there's so many books that come out, and practically everybody has a different process of writing. You know, you just have to find your own way, don't you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
The book is very suspenseful. It's very tense, and it's quite unnerving at times, particularly in around the house, and when the book progresses and the sort of the watching becomes more intense. How did you sort of build that into your writing and into the story? Because it does really make the hairs on the back of your neck go up when you're reading it in some places, because it's really quite scary in some bits, isn't it? There's, you know, because you don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Well, for me, always, you know, first of all, being in the first person narrative, I find is a really good way of getting that tension across, because, you know, you want the reader to feel what Seb is feeling, what Adriana's feeling. So it's all about, you know, the vivid language, you know, what they can sense, building up the use of the senses, the vivid language, the sort of the terror that they're feeling. If you can sort of get inside their heads and evoke that, I think that I always like to write in the first person, because I feel you can get across that more effectively. And you know, all the usual sort of tricks, like short, sharp sentences, making the chapters shorter as they go along, you know, ending on a cliffhanger into the next one. What they can hear, the sort of creepy noises, and just all that type of thing. You know, like when he's running and he's, you know, he's on his own in Hampstead, and he's already terrified, having been contacted by this watcher, and then suddenly the neighbour pops out of nowhere. I don't want to say too much, but, you know, it's these type of jumpy moments that you can, and then getting across his reaction to that as well. Yeah, it's a mixture of things, really. I think, you know, it's the language you use, but it's also the thought process of the character, and the tension you can hear in their conversation between each other, because obviously he's not telling her something, she's not telling him something. They want to tell each other, but they're too scared to. And it's you know, dialogue is very important as well. You can get a lot out of dialogue as well,
because it does with the pace, doesn't it, as well? You said about leaving that sort of chapter on a cliffhanger, and having the shorter chapters, so you get, as a reader, you're sort of galloping through, because your books are fast paced, aren't they? And this one isn't. You know, you want to keep reading to find out. You don't want to put down in the chapter. And again, is that something that comes quite naturally as you're writing, or is that something that you have to sort of go back and add in afterwards?
It comes quite naturally. I think all my books start off slightly slower, because I like to sort of set the scene, and not tell, you shouldn't tell, you should show show the readers what the characters are all about, you know, why they're there, and then yes, then I will deliberately up the pace and up the tension, because you need some context, I think. I don't think you can go straight into like action, otherwise it just, you know, it's a bit meaningless, isn't it, really? You need to.
No, I mean, I think the setting the scene is really important, isn't it? And I think in this one, where we sort of meet, where we meet Seb, and then Max, who's the sort of estate agent, sort of agent sort of thing, isn't he? Who comes around, and then we meet Adriana later on.
But of course, I was going to say, you had the prologue, and then you have Max going around the house, and then you've got the Watcher written in italics, which because it was quite a long chapter with Max showing him around, and then I wanted to sort of insert that to make the reader jump, think, oh my god, she's being watched, type of thing, or who is this person? What's his agenda? And then we go to Adriana. So it's kind of, it's just sort of mixing it up.
Yeah. I wondered whether Max would sort of appear, when I first started reading it, I wondered whether Max would be more of a bigger character.
Yeah, I did think about that, but then I thought it would get a bit too complicated. And also he's quite young, isn't he? So I don't think that would have been very believable as a choice, as a potential.
No, I think he serves his purpose, doesn't
he? Yeah, exactly.
Bless him.
So. Oh no.
I've got some more questions coming in, and Vicky has joined us as well on the Facebook chat. I can just see. So. Hi, Vicky. Sarah's saying she loved The Neighbour. It's really difficult. We can't do a lot of The Neighbour, but she is a bit of a nosy neighbour, isn't she?
A bit of a what neighbour?
A nosy neighbour.
Oh yeah, definitely. She's very nosy, but she's another unreliable. You were talking about unreliable characters and impact on the plot, because you don't she's got a bit of a drinking problem. You're not quite sure whether to believe what she thinks she's seen or not, but she's clearly seen something. So that's another way of increasing the tension, because and Seb didn't know about that till he meets her. So that increases the tension in him, and he's thinking, what on earth? I thought it was going to be all right, and now I'm being told this, and I've just had this email as well. So that's other characters can have an impact on tension as well, sort of bringing in that other element.
No, I think that's it is sort of that tension. It really is. I always love it in a book when you genuinely feel unnerved, and it's sort of the house is it's Serenity House. I mean, it's got a name, hasn't it? You thinking about it, it's sort of thinking about it being very peaceful and lovely, and it's
a lovely house. It is full of light, that's why Seb thinks it's all going to be okay, and then the very opposite happens. And I specifically chose that name because I wanted to have that sort of dramatic irony, him being lulled into this false sense of security.
So you said about looking at houses, was it based on, did you have a picture of it in your head when you
I did lots of looking up of houses on prime location, or typing in like 5 to 10 million pound houses in Hampstead, because I wanted to see, and they really exist. I mean, oh my goodness, these houses are incredible, and they do have basement pools and beautiful, open rooftops, with just gardens on the roof and massive. So there was a specific house that I looked at, which I modelled this particular house on, for sure, because I wanted to make sure these houses existed. It wasn't just my imagination, and they really do. Some lucky people.
I know, it's amazing. I mean, you sort of think, you know they do exist, because Rightmove and as you say, but you got
prime location.
Prime location.
Right,
yeah. I mean, it is amazing, and it must be such a great tool now to have as an author, to have that sort of. We talked about your internet history search, and but I was thinking, probably back in the day, before the internet, you would have had to have gone to an estate agent or something and got pieces of paper to look at houses online.
And just go around yourself and walk around the area, and it's so much easier. We're so lucky. There's so much we can look up these days. It's incredible.
I'm just going to look back to the questions. So Sarah said, do you have a favourite author that you have to buy their latest book?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I like so many, because, back when I was a teenager, I would always say John Grisham. He was my favourite thriller author. And now there are so many good authors that I love psychological thrillers. I mean, you can probably tell. So T.M. Logan, B.P. Walter, I love their books. I love Barnaby's books because they're so dark, and I think they're quite like mine. I think we write quite similar books, so I really enjoy reading his books. Who else? B.A. Paris. I love her books as well. I can't believe I've got her quote on my book. I just remember reading her sort of 10 years ago, where her first book came out, Behind Closed Doors, and I loved it. I remember reading it on holiday.
I remember that.
Yeah, I think they're making it into a movie actually. So, I always like aspired to be like someone like her, the way she writes. So yeah, I really enjoy her books too. But there's just so many good writers these days. It's bad for me because there's a lot of competition, but just joking. It's just, yeah, there's so many brilliant books out there. And I tend to,
but there's so much hope, isn't there, to do something different, because you all manage it. That's the amazing thing. I think, when they say there's sort of 7 stories, isn't there, in reality? Isn't it 7 or something? But actually, you're very
it's just putting a different spin on it, isn't it? It's like, you think back to the first, probably what put psychological thrillers on the market, sort of Gone Girl. It's a very simple scenario, isn't it? It's about a husband and wife who break up, got a marriage gone wrong, but she put such a different spin on it, such a great twist to it, that it made it really exciting. And I think it's just coming up with that slightly different take on a particular scenario.
It's amazing because that wasn't even that long ago, was it, that we think that was the sort of book? And I remember the other one was Girl on the Train.
Those two books really put it on the map, really. And I think it was because they were just everyday relatable scenarios, and people think, I could see myself in that. I could, I know someone like that, and that's what makes them so compelling, because we can relate to those setups.
Vicky's asking, out of all of your books, this is a bit like asking what your favourite child is. Do you have a favourite character?
Oh gosh, my books. Well, Susan was outrageous in The Loyal Friend, I think. Have you read The Loyal Friend? I think she.
No, I haven't. I think
Vicky will know, but she was so awful, but she was also quite. She's my publisher's favourite character, Keshini. She loves Susan. She just loves Susan. She just says what she wants to say. But I did actually, to be fair, I did really enjoy writing these two characters. I think it was because they were both empathetic, and because I went into more depth with these characters, I did really enjoy writing them. Although Adriana's quite hard to write, but
but I imagine she was quite a challenge to write. Just because of just for lots of reasons, I think we can say.
She's my characters were very interesting to write and difficult characters, but I wouldn't say I particularly like. They had real edges to them, so they were fun to write, but I wouldn't say they were my favourite characters. Whereas I think these two characters are probably my favourite because they're empathetic, I think.
Yeah. I think I can definitely, Vicky saying about she loves Susan, and I quite like a bad character. I think you can have so much fun with them. I think that must give you as a writer that sort of that license to be really bad.
Well, that's true. Actually, thinking about it, in The Final Party, Lana was quite fun to write because
I remember she wasn't particularly pleasant either.
What she did in the past, to get her hands on Johnny, and she was quite fun to write. But then she kind of, she kind of saved herself a little bit towards the end. So, you could see the side. And also she had, the backstory there, she didn't have the greatest childhood, didn't have a dad. So you can kind of understand. And that's why I always try to build in with even my not so nice characters, give them some sort of reason why, redeeming feature, or make them sympathetic, because you can see why they might act in the way they do.
Yeah, we always used to say that, you never know what's going on behind, you know, in other people's lives. So, you know, you shouldn't judge.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think as a reader of a crime book, is you do tend to judge, because that's what you know, you want to. And if you think going back to sort of historical, you know, thinking of like the golden age crime, quite often the characters in them were quite dysfunctional families. You know, they're trying to bump each other off for the will and the money and everything.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
not, although the psychological thriller genre, as you know, Gone Girl is quite new, it's just probably a more modern take on, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. We think about films like Psycho and Rear Window and things like that. I mean, they were the original probably psychological thrillers. So definitely, it's, you know, he's Rear Window, he's watching a neighbor. You know, it's
yeah.
And when you think about Woman in the Window, that's a similar type of thing. So yeah, definitely.
And the bird,
because it's human nature, isn't it? It's human nature.
Yeah.
Human nature since the beginning of
yeah
time.
People like that.
It's that's why, that's what they're all about, just human nature at its darkest,
and why we find it so fascinating.
Yeah,
isn't
because
it?
we're all tempted to go down that dark side, but we don't. We stay within the morally acceptable boundaries, but we can live that life through these characters, you know, from the comfort of our homes.
People often say that, don't they? It's why is crime so popular? And you're like, because of this, because
it's
most people,
exciting, and most people play by the rules.
Exactly.
You get to see what happens through a book when people don't play by the rules.
So talking of books, can you tell us about what you're working on next?
Well, I have finished it.
Wow.
With my publisher now. Hopefully she's enjoying it. It's actually in a school setting, this one. It is in a primary school setting. And I just tell you I can't go into too much detail, but it's about a single mum who's found murdered on the night of their Christmas social, the parents' social, and it's told through the eyes of the inspector, but also through flashbacks to when the mother and her son joined the school, and how she, and up to the point of her death, but also through him interviewing different of the mums who are in her immediate circle. But there's also a chat forum involved. So it's very different again, and there's a big twist, obviously, which I hope, and it's quite
no other.
And it's quite, I think, it's quite chilling at the end, I think. And I've tried to do, because I know the school thing's been done before, but I've tried to do something really different in that scenario. So I hope it pulls off. I hope it's a good read.
It sounds amazing. I think, like you said, about those real life sort of settings, isn't it? Like the landlord, the school. You know, generally most people will be able to identify with some of, or any of, some of them.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah.
And I've got some very empathetic characters. I do have one particular awful character who actually makes Susan look a bit like an angel. So, so you might enjoy reading her.
Yeah, I will. I do like a bad character. I do like a bad character, because I mean, sometimes you want them to get their comeuppance, which sometimes happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe they'll have a sort of something that happens, and they'll redeem themselves a little bit.
Yeah. I always try
or
to.
If not,
yeah.
Yeah. If not, they'll end up bumped off somewhere.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, because I think I've lost my train. I was going to ask you something then, and it's completely gone out of my head. I'll come back to it in a second. But I think that sort of when you're talking about characters that are complex, and you don't want them to be one-dimensional, do you? And you were saying about like doing it from the first person, it does make you really get inside their head. And do you sort of find yourself, when you're writing, very immersed in their lives? Do you do you dream about them?
I almost feel like, I am living that life when you get, and I think the first person really enables you to do that, because you're really getting into their psyche and how they're feeling and reacting to other people. And I don't dream about them or anything, but I do think about them a lot. When I've stopped writing, it'll be in my head the whole time. And I do get really immersed in the characters, for sure. Yeah.
There's lots of love coming through on the chat about Sarah, Vicky, everybody saying how much they loved it. And Annette has said she hated the bad character so much.
In the new one, she did. She sent me a message saying, "Oh, I hate her." It was so brilliant. It's really laughed so much. Yeah, she's this character.
But that's so good.
A piece of work. That's for sure.
But I think the ability to be able to evoke those emotions in a reader is must be something that you really sort of strive for as an author, to be able to, get that reaction and for people to feel hate or, dislike or whatever you call it for wanting characters.
And that's when the dialogue is really important, because it's sort of cutting comments that they can make that, that's how you get the reaction of people and the reaction of the other character as well, so you feel empathy for them. But it is fun, because I'm quite a quiet, naturally quiet person and everything. So to become someone really bad is quite fun sometimes, just to sort of experiment with different voices.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe that's why these characters are more, the ones, Seb and Adriana, are more empathic, because they sort of, maybe that's coming from your own sort of
I think so. And they're both only children. I'm an only child, so they both immerse themselves in their sort of books and characters, and like Seb, I'm very close to my parents, and he really, my parents are still alive, but I can imagine that kind of devastation that he feels is you can I can imagine that in myself.
Yeah. I think for anybody who's read the book, I'm sure that we all have lots of questions. And I know I asked you a few before we started, because I have read it, and I was, so if you haven't read it already, then you really do need to read it, because it's really clever and really unexpected, and gripping and shocking, and just so many words. I really, really, really loved it. So you've handed this one in. What's next? Do you know the next one? Because I think we talked before that you said you have quite a lot of ideas. So
I have got an idea for a new one as well, which is like, I can't really say anything, but it involves a husband and wife, but the twist is really shocking, like, for me. So I hope it pulls off okay. But I'm really quite excited about the idea. I think it's quite a different idea. But I'm in the middle of that at the moment, actually. So yeah.
It sounds like you quite like to challenge yourself, like to push yourself out of your sort of, because you could have just carried on, because people really enjoy your book, so you could have just carried on writing what you knew, but you sort of seem that you want to sort of push yourself to the next thing, or investigate, I guess, as well.
I like to do something different, and like you said, it is a saturated market, so I like to try and do something that's a bit different, that will stand out. I'd love to do another holiday one again. I would quite like to do another thriller abroad. That would be quite fun. Maybe I could do some research myself on location.
That was great, wasn't it? Like, the final party was brilliant.
Well, I didn't need to, because I knew that area so well, so I didn't even need to go, which was a shame in a way. But
I think you probably need to do some research somewhere hot and exotic.
I think so. Just to get that authenticity across, that would be good.
Definitely.
But I do like to challenge myself and do something different. So but it is a bit scary, because I'm always trying to think up a different twist, a different idea, and you don't want to replicate the same thing.
No.
So
that must be difficult.
It's quite tricky. But I'll keep
Is
trying.
there any other genres you'd like to write? Would you?
Well, obviously, I've written the straight thriller genres, like with my
Yeah,
Car, and
yeah.
I have actually written half of a third. So waiting to see whether that's a go in terms of being published. So I've written 2 other standalone thrillers, which are about female lawyers that get caught up in pretty nasty situations in their law firms. One is actually more a political thriller, and it's got
Interesting.
various themes of like white supremacy, things like that. So I wrote this ages ago, still trying to get it published. It's just such a hard, even though I'm an established psychological thriller author, it's still hard to get, your books
Yeah,
published.
I guess I guess
That's hard, but I still have hopes for that. Yeah, I mean, everyone says to me, you should try and write a romance book, do something completely different, because there's quite a lot of thriller authors that just suddenly write romance books. I've got a couple of friends that, like my friend Emma Ray, she just brought out, well, she's Emma Scully, and she wrote spy thrillers, but she just brought out Love Game with Hera, and she's been brilliant at it, and she just suddenly decided to write romance, and it came really naturally to her. So, but that's another genre, isn't it? So it's.
Definitely. And some people are very much, no, I like crime. I want to write crime. That's
For
what I
me,
do.
at the
That's what I want
moment,
to
that's
do.
what I want to do. I love the challenge of crime. It's such a it's a challenge for the reader and the author, because I don't know if it's my law background or sort of like, I like putting together a puzzle, and I like trying to fool the reader.
Yeah.
I enjoy all of that. And I love a good twist, and I find it quite exciting. I really get immersed into it. So for me at the moment, that's what I want to focus on, even though there are so many.
There's quite a lot of people offering to coming on holiday on your research trip
Oh,
with you.
yeah, maybe I'll visit the Caribbean or the Maldives.
Yeah. If you were going to go to like Weston-super-Mare in November, they might not be so keen.
No, I can understand that. Yeah, that wouldn't be so.
I'm sure Weston-super-Mare is lovely in November, but
no disrespect.
It's not really the tropical paradise that you were looking for.
No, exactly.
I'm just looking at the time before we get to the end. I was going to ask you if you've read anything recently that you'd sort of like to tell us about. Anything you'd like to recommend?
I've read a few psychological thrillers that have been absolutely brilliant. So Sarah Clarke's The Night She Dies is really good. I know Vicky's read that. It's really, I think it's her best one. It's about that's set in a secondary school, and it's about a teenage girl that's found dead. She's got a sister, but they're from sort of the foster. They've been foster homes, and suspicion sort of falls on one of the richer kids, and it's really, really gripping. There's like quite important themes, quite heart-rending things like bullying, that type of stuff. It's really good. It's a real page turner. I really recommend that. And I've read The Garden Party by B.P. Walter, which is coming out. I think it's coming out the same day as Sarah's, actually, 4th of July. And that is really good. It's very dark. It's a bit like Saltburn. Did we watch Saltburn?
Oh, yes, really? Yes.
And it's like that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So The Garden Party. Oh, yeah, that sounds
really.
I like the sound of that just from the title.
Yeah, no, it's really good, because it's about this engagement party, and it goes back and forth, and these big secrets gradually come out, and it's really good. Another psychological thriller I read is The Family Home by Sophia Spears. She's sort of loomed her book, so that's coming out next week, I think, which is another really, if you want an unreliable narrator, that is a really good one.
Yeah.
But I mean, outside the psychological thriller, I'm really looking forward to my very dear friend's book, Vase Khan. He's got the follow-up to In the Company of Strangers, In the Shadows of Love. So I've nearly finished it, and it's really brilliant. I love it. The characters are so larger than life, and it gives you a real insight into that high society in there. That's a really good book to put on your list as well. Too many good books.
so many recommendations. There's some great ones as well on there. I mean, I haven't read any of those, so I should be adding all those to
definitely.
the small pile that I have behind me, as you can see.
And then, I mean, those psychological thrillers in particular, they're very dark and twisty, and that's why I like them so much, because I like them like that. So I'd recommend them.
Yeah, me too. I must admit, I think the dark and twisty, I think I've got darker and twistier as I've got older. I think I like them. So I still do like, I like cozy crime as well, but I do like the sort of the contrast between, picking up a book that is going to have a sort of a gentle murder or something that's a little bit more darker and something more sinister, hidden.
Yeah. Something more psychological.
Yes. Yeah. So just before we go, would you, without giving any spoilers, give us another little quick overview of why, if you haven't read Under a Roof already, why you should?
Oh gosh. Because it's very dark, twisty. It's probably like nothing you've sort of read. It's got the shocking moments will really shock you, and the end will hopefully floor you. I don't know how to say it. I'm not very good at plugging those, but yeah,
I think that covers it really well. I think it's I think we've managed to talk about a book without talking about the book. 6 minutes, so I think that's pretty good.
That ramps up the intrigue, doesn't it? So,
yeah.
Which is what you want.
Exactly. The fact that we can talk about it for 56 minutes without actually saying, giving any spoilers. I think, I think that's pretty good.
It's been great.
Thank you, Alex, for joining us. Thank you to everybody on the chat as well, because it definitely just adds such a good thing as well when we can sort of chat between us, and I've managed to finally get it working on Facebook after Facebook changed all their settings again. So that was really good.
Yeah. No break up or lag or anything.
No. We didn't. Actually, there was one question I was going to ask you. Are you doing any more events? Because I saw you had your lovely launch last week, which I wasn't able to come to. But
yeah, that was lovely. Gosh, I couldn't. Like 80 people turned up. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Especially lovely to have bloggers there. It was just so, for someone like me who's not with the biggest publisher, with a great publisher, but they're not the biggest. They don't have the biggest reach, and the blogger support I've had, I can't even tell you how grateful I am. It makes all the difference. It was lovely to meet so many bloggers in person, so that was lovely. But yeah, I'm doing Harrogate. I'm on a panel at Harrogate, which I'm still like myself. I can't believe it. I'm on the Psych Thrillers panel on the Saturday morning.
That's amazing.
With T.M. Logan, Abigail Dean, and Chris Ewan. So I'm really excited about that. Also quite terrified, but I am excited. There is another one. Nothing's been announced yet, so I can't really say at the moment.
Okay.
I'm doing a smaller one in Medway in Kent, actually. It's Medway Literary Festival in November. They're organising a crime panel on the Saturday. I think it's the 16th of November, so I'm doing that. And I'm doing a couple of Waterstones events.
Okay.
Yes, if anyone's in Kent, please come. I think it's at the university. Yeah. I'll be putting more details online. And I'm doing events with Barnaby and Sarah, actually. One with Sarah at Clapham Waterstones on the 2nd of July. It was going to be the 4th, but I think something's happening that day, 4th of July. So that was annoying. We had to change the date.
Yeah, people might be distracted.
And yeah, I think it's the 7th of August with Barnaby. So that's what's in the diary at the moment. Fantastic. But yeah, Harrogate is the big one. Which,
yeah, no, that's really exciting. Well done. That's really, you should be really, really pleased with that one, because that's great. I'm going to go one year. It's so far from where I live in Devon. It's like half the other way in the country.
Yeah, it's a long way, and it's not, it's quite expensive, but it's a brilliant atmosphere. Yeah. I mean, it was my first time last year. I hosted an author dinner, which was lovely. And there is no other festival like it, I don't think. Just the kind of, there's so many book people there, like from like publishers to agents to bloggers to just passionate crime readers. There's a real buzz about it.
I'll have to save up 1 year to go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And I wish you the best. Not that you're going to need it with Under Her Roof, because it's amazing. We all loved it. And good luck. And speak to you soon.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.